Your mother's cheap trinkets fetched about $800 at that little consignment shop downtown. My stepmother Veronica smirked across the dinner table, swirling her wine with the casual cruelty she'd perfected over 15 years. I spent it on a spa day, facials, massage, the works. I figured someone should finally get some use out of that dusty old box. Dad shrugged beside her, she needed the relaxation. Work's been stressful. But why were my hands steady as I opened my laptop, and why was Veronica's smirk beginning to falter as I turned the screen toward her? Those trinkets were appraised last month, I said calmly. By Christie's auction house. Would you like to see the documentation? The color drained from her face as the appraisal filled the screen. 14 pieces. Detailed photographs. Authentication certificates. Total estimated value, $4.7 million. I also have the insurance policy my mother took out before she died, I continued. And the police report I filed this morning. They're very interested in speaking with you about the sale of stolen property. Dad's wine glass shattered against the floor. My mother, Elizabeth Hartwell Reeves, came from old money. Not the flashy, new money wealth that Veronica aspired to, all designer logos and social media posts, but the quiet, generational kind that didn't need to announce itself. Her family had made their fortune in textiles in the 1800s, and while most of the money had been distributed across various descendants over the centuries, the jewelry had stayed intact. Passed from mother to daughter for 6 generations, the collection was irreplaceable. A Cartier necklace from 1920. A pair of Van Cleef & Arpels earrings commissioned for my great-grandmother's wedding. An Art Deco bracelet designed by Suzanne Belperin. Pieces that belonged in museums, worn by a woman who treated them like family heirlooms rather than status symbols. Mom died when I was 12. Cancer, swift and merciless. In her final weeks, she made me promise to protect the jewelry. It's your inheritance, Sophia, she'd whispered, pressing the velvet box into my hands. Not just the money it's worth, but the history. Every piece has a story. Your grandmother wore these earrings to her first dance. Your great-grandmother received this necklace on her wedding day. Someday, you'll wear them at your wedding. And you'll give them to your daughter. I promise, Mom. I'll keep them safe. I've put them in trust for you. Your father knows. He promised he'd protect them until you're old enough. She died 3 days later. And within 2 years, Dad had married Veronica. Veronica Reynolds was everything my mother wasn't. Loud where Mom was quiet. Flashy where Mom was understated. Hungry in ways that made everyone uncomfortable but no one willing to name. She met Dad at a charity gala, one of the few he attended in the fog of grief following Mom's death, and inserted herself into our lives with surgical precision. I'm not trying to replace your mother, she told me at their wedding, her smile not reaching her eyes. I just want to make your father happy. I was 14. I knew a lie when I heard one. The years that followed were a slow-motion heist. Veronica systematically erased my mother from our home, her photos moved to the attic, her books donated, her clothes given away without asking if I wanted anything. Dad, lost in grief and desperate for someone to take care of the domestic sphere he'd never managed, let her do whatever she wanted. The jewelry was the last thing left. I'd kept the velvet box in my room, hidden in the back of my closet, checking on it every few months like visiting a grave. The pieces connected me to Mom in a way nothing else could. When I held her grandmother's brooch, I could almost feel her presence. When I turned 18, the trust matured. The jewelry legally became mine. I had the documents transferred to a safe deposit box at my bank, along with updated appraisals and a comprehensive insurance policy. I also moved out, escaping to college on the opposite coast, putting as much distance between myself and Veronica as physically possible. For 7 years, I built my own life. Graduated with honors. Landed a job in finance. Got engaged to a wonderful man named Thomas who understood why I kept a velvet box in our home safe and never asked me to sell what was inside. I thought the jewelry was protected. I thought my distance kept it safe. I was wrong. The discovery happened by accident. I'd come home for Thanksgiving, the first visit in 2 years, and only because Dad had called personally, sounding older and more fragile than I remembered. Thomas and I had flown cross-country, prepared for an awkward holiday with Veronica, planning to leave the morning after. The first night, I couldn't sleep. Jet lag and the strange familiarity of my childhood home kept me wandering the halls at 2 a.m., looking at the spaces where my mother's influence had been systematically erased. I found myself in front of the safe in Dad's study. The combination was my mother's birthday, Dad had never changed it. I opened it on impulse, just to see, just to remember. The velvet box was there. But it was empty. I stood in the dark study, holding the hollow container that should have held $4.7 million in irreplaceable heirlooms, and felt something cold settle into my bones. In the morning, I said nothing. I ate breakfast with my father and stepmother, nodded at their small talk, and excused myself to take a walk. Instead, I drove to the consignment shop downtown, the one Veronica had mentioned in passing, complaining about their pathetic offer for a vintage ring she found in the attic. I'm looking for some pieces that may have come in recently, I told the owner, describing my mother's jewelry with the precision of someone who'd memorized every detail. The woman's face went pale. Those pieces, a woman brought them in last month. She said they were costume jewelry, family pieces, not worth anything. I gave her $800 for the lot. What happened to them? I sold them to a private collector who specializes in estate jewelry. He recognized what they were immediately. She was wringing her hands now. He paid me $50,000 and said I was lucky to get it, that they were worth 10 times that, $50,000. For $4.7 million in heirlooms. My mother's legacy, sold for costume jewelry prices and then flipped to a collector who knew exactly what he was getting. I need his contact information, I said. Now. The collector's name was Harrison Webb. He was a legitimate dealer, well known in certain circles, with a reputation for finding undervalued pieces and selling them to museums and private collectors at appropriate prices. He also had a reputation for discretion. Miss Reeves, he said when I called. I've been expecting to hear from someone about those pieces. I knew they were significant the moment I saw them. Then you knew they were stolen. I suspected. But the woman who sold them to the consignment shop claimed ownership, and the shop owner didn't ask questions. Legally, I purchased in good faith. Those pieces belonged to my mother. They were in trust for me. Silence on the other end. I'm not a thief, Miss Reeves. I'm a businessman. But I'm also not unreasonable. He paused. The pieces are intact. I haven't resold them, something told me to wait. If you can prove ownership and compensate me for my purchase price, I'm willing to discuss their return. Name your price. $1.2 million. What I would have received from the museums I was negotiating with. It was extortion, technically. But it was also my only way to get my mother's jewelry back without years of litigation. I'll have my lawyer contact you, I said. And Mr. Webb? I suggest you cooperate fully. Because the alternative is a very public investigation into how a reputable dealer came to possess stolen property. I look forward to resolving this amicably, Miss Reeves. I had the insurance documents. I had the appraisals. I had the police report. But before I destroyed Veronica, I wanted her to confess. Thanksgiving dinner was the perfect stage. Dad had invited his brothers and their families, an extended family gathering that Veronica loved because it gave her an audience for her performances. She spent all day in the kitchen, playing the gracious hostess, basking in compliments about her cooking, which was actually prepared by the caterer she pretended not to use. I waited until dessert. Veronica, I noticed some of Mom's things have been moved around the house, I said casually. Whatever happened to that box of jewelry she left me? Veronica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, that old box? I found it while cleaning out the attic. Just costume pieces, really. I took them to a consignment shop to see if they were worth anything. And? $800. Cheap trinkets, like I always suspected. She laughed. I spent it on a spa day. Figured someone should finally get some use out of them. Dad nodded along. She needed the relaxation. Work's been stressful. I looked at my father, this man who had promised my dying mother he would protect her legacy, and felt the last threads of my attachment to him dissolve. That's interesting, I said, pulling out my laptop. Because I had those pieces appraised by Christie's last month. Would you like to see what they found? The table went quiet as I turned the screen toward them. 14 pieces, I read aloud. Including a 1920 Cartier diamond necklace valued at $1.2 million. Van Cleef and Arpels earrings from 1935, valued at $800,000. A Suzanne Belprin bracelet worth $650,000. Total estimated value, $4.7 million. Veronica's face had gone gray. Those can't be the same pieces. They are. I have photographs, authentication certificates, and an insurance policy my mother took out before she died. The policy specifically lists each piece and confirms my ownership. I closed the laptop. I also filed a police report this morning. Theft of property valued over $100,000 is a felony in this state, Veronica. You're looking at 10 to 20 years. And? Dad found his voice. Sophia, there must be some mistake. The only mistake was trusting you to protect what Mom left me. I stood up. You promised her, Dad. On her deathbed, you promised you would keep her jewelry safe for me. And you let your wife sell it for a spa day. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. You spent 15 years not wanting to know what Veronica really is because knowing would require you to do something about it. I gathered my things. The police will be in touch. I suggest you both get lawyers. Uncle Marcus, Dad's older brother, spoke for the first time. Sophia, what are you hoping to accomplish here? Justice. The jewelry is being recovered. I've already negotiated with the buyer. Veronica will be prosecuted for theft. And Dad. I looked at my father, really looked at him. Dad will finally have to choose between his wife and his daughter. Something he's been avoiding since the day Mom died. I walked out without looking back. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Veronica was arrested 2 days after Thanksgiving. The evidence was overwhelming. Text messages showing she knew the jewelry's value, she'd Googled several pieces before selling them, security footage from the consignment shop, and the dealer's testimony about her suspicious eagerness to sell. She tried to claim she believed the pieces were hers, gifts from my father, but the trust documents destroyed that defense. The jewelry had been legally mine since I turned 18. Veronica had known exactly what she was doing. Dad tried to intervene. He called my lawyer, offered to pay restitution, begged for leniency. She didn't understand what she was taking. She's not a criminal. She sold $4.7 million in heirlooms for $800 and spent the money on herself, my lawyer replied. That's the definition of criminal. But if Sophia would just drop the charges. My client has no interest in dropping charges. Your wife committed a felony. She'll face the consequences. The trial was brief. Veronica pleaded guilty to theft and fraud to avoid a longer sentence. She received 5 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 3. At the sentencing, she finally dropped the mask. You think you've won, she hissed at me in the courthouse hallway. But you've just destroyed your father. He'll never forgive you. He destroyed himself when he chose you over my mother's memory. I met her eyes without flinching. And honestly, Veronica? I stopped needing his forgiveness years ago. The jewelry was returned to me 3 months later. Harrison Webb honored our agreement, $1.2 million for the collection's return, paid from the insurance settlement. Every piece was intact, undamaged, as beautiful as the day my mother had worn them. I sat in my apartment with Thomas, the velvet box open on the coffee table between us, crying for the first time since this whole nightmare began. They're back, I whispered, holding the Cartier necklace up to the light. She tried to erase Mom completely, and she couldn't. They're back. Thomas held me while I sobbed, understanding without needing to be told what these pieces represented, not money, not status, but a connection to a woman I'd lost too soon and never stopped missing. Your mom would be proud of you, he said. For sending my stepmother to prison? For protecting what she loved? For keeping your promise? I thought about that 12-year-old girl, clutching a velvet box and swearing to keep it safe. She couldn't have imagined this, the betrayal, the theft, the courtroom drama. But she'd made a promise, and somehow, against everything, she'd kept it. I want to wear the earrings at our wedding, I said suddenly. The Van Cleef ones. My grandmother wore them to her first dance. My mother wore them when she married Dad. Then you'll wear them too. And someday, our daughter will. Dad reached out once, after the sentencing. A letter, handwritten, full of explanations that weren't quite apologies. I never knew the jewelry was so valuable. Veronica told me they were costume pieces. I trusted her. I know that sounds naive now, but she was my wife. I thought she loved me. She never loved you, I thought. She loved what you could give her. I'm not asking for forgiveness, the letter continued. I know I failed you, and I failed your mother's memory. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. For all of it. For not protecting you. For not seeing what was right in front of me. For choosing comfort over duty. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it away and didn't respond. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have a relationship with my father again. Maybe we could rebuild something from the wreckage. But trust, once shattered, doesn't reassemble easily. And he'd shattered more than trust, he'd shattered the last connection I had to my mother, all for a woman who'd seen our family as marks rather than loved ones. Some things can't be forgiven. They can only be survived. The wedding was last October. I wore my grandmother's Van Cleef and Arpels earrings and my mother's Cartier necklace. Thomas's eyes welled up when he saw me walking down the aisle, draped in heirlooms that had almost been lost forever. You're wearing your family, he whispered. I'm carrying them with me. Into our future. Dad wasn't there. I hadn't invited him. But in a strange way, my mother was. I felt her in the weight of the diamonds against my skin, in the history that had been passed down through generations, in the promise I'd kept against all odds. After the ceremony, my maid of honor asked about the jewelry. Those pieces are incredible. Are they antiques? They're heirlooms. 6 generations of women in my family have worn them. They must be worth a fortune. I smiled, thinking of Veronica's smirk, of the $800 spa day, of the prison cell where she was probably sitting right now. They're worth more than money. They're worth everything. She called them cheap trinkets because she couldn't see their value. She sold them for pocket change because she thought no one would notice. But here's the thing about heirlooms, they carry the weight of everyone who wore them before. My mother. My grandmother. My great-grandmother. 6 generations of women who loved and lost and persevered. Veronica tried to erase that history for a spa day. Instead, she erased herself. The jewelry is home now. Where it belongs. Where it will stay.